Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our Squirrel Key Island webinar. Thank you very much for taking time from your busy schedules to join us. We have myself, most of you should know me. My name is Darren Doyle. If we haven't met yet, you'll have been receiving our emails over the course of the last few years and certainly the last few weeks. David Sewell, co-founder and CEO of Agrinosotros, is here with us as well. And coming in from Colorado is John Turley, our host for this evening. You'll be hearing a lot from John. He's the most formidable expert that we know in the market of Hamburger's Key.
Hi, this is John Turley. As I'm sure everyone is aware, it was a very momentous day today on Wall Street with the end of the bull market. It's an 11-year run coming to a conclusion today. Obviously, the markets have been very topsy-turvy. It's been a roller coaster over the last couple of weeks, especially this last week. And so we really feel that the timing of this opportunity and of this webinar couldn't be better. We felt this was an incredible home run opportunity without there being the roller coaster effect that the stock market has seen or any of the fears that we've seen associated with coronavirus. But particularly in light of those things, we feel it makes this an even more solid alternative investment to diversify your portfolio.
So I'd like to officially welcome you all again to our Wednesday night webinar, Squirrel Key Island LLC. Very exciting syndication opportunity in Hamburger's Key in southern Belize. We can think of no one better, more qualified, more connected, and with more experience in this market to not only be presenting this webinar, but to be our partner in this and past and future deals. Mr. John Turley, co-founder and CEO of the Caribbean and Central American region of RE/MAX, for multiple years #1 RE/MAX realtor in the world, our friend John Turley.
Thank you very much, Darren. I appreciate it. And thank you to all of you who are attending. As you can see here on the home screen, that's a photo of the town of San Pedro on the picturesque island of Hamburger's Key, Belize. Hamburger's Key is the fastest growing tourism destination in the Caribbean, and it is a market that I've come to know very well. I lived on the island for 14 years full-time with my family. I've been investing in Hamburger's Key for a little over 16 years now, and I'm going to share with you my bio in just a moment, but I just wanted to talk about this photo for a second. The town of San Pedro, you can see the barrier reef, the Belize barrier reef there in the foreground, located just about a quarter mile or 400 meters offshore. It's the largest living barrier reef in the world, and literally just 3 miles from San Pedro as the crow flies is the Holchan Marine Reserve, the first underwater national park in Central America, considered one of the top 10 dive and snorkel sites in the entire world. So an absolutely beautiful place. If you've never been there, if you have been there, you know what I'm talking about. From an investor standpoint, I personally see probably more deal flow than anybody come across my desk for markets all throughout the Caribbean. And this particular market is the one that I'm the most excited about in terms of the value add opportunity that we have to bring to investors. And you'll understand as you see this presentation exactly what I mean by that and why we're so excited about it. So again, just so you know who is talking to you and who's at the head of the room here, so to speak, a little bit about myself with regard to my bio. As Darren mentioned, I'm the CEO and the co-owner of RE/MAX Caribbean and Central America, the largest real estate company in the Caribbean and Central America with over 60 offices and oversight of 600 agents. Our territory covers 35 countries, islands, and territories. And so I really do have my finger on the pulse of real estate, tourism, real estate investment and development. And that really gives me an unfair advantage, if you will, when it comes to finding and sourcing deals such as this. I'm also the CEO and the fund manager for Belize Asset Management. And as the name suggests, the focus of this particular fund of mine is really sourcing and finding deals specific to Belize and even more specific to the market of Hamburger's Key. I've been personally involved in over 1,700 real estate transactions in the Hamburger's Key market over the last 15 years. I've personally invested in over 125 of those transactions, and I've assisted with syndicating or raising just over $50 million of private equity for real estate development in this market over the last 6 years. And I'm very, very honored to be the first and the only American to serve on the board of directors of the Belize Real Estate Association and to help to write the real estate I should say the real estate law or the Real Estate Act to formalize and make real estate licensing a part of the landscape here in Belize, something that's before the government right now in the Senate. So that's been for the last 10 years I've been on the board of directors. So I'm coming to you from a position of experience where I really know this market inside and out. I do think I probably know it better than anybody else alive. And I'm going to share with you some of the highlights of this market. As I mentioned, it is the Caribbean's fastest growing market for tourism. And I'm sure all of you are familiar with TripAdvisor. TripAdvisor, of course, is that well-known website with millions of reviews from people in 81 different countries. And Ambergris Caye last year was voted the #1 destination in Central America, according to all of the reviewers. The traveler's choice, if you were, for TripAdvisor acknowledged Ambergris Caye as the #1 destination. Out of the entire world, it ranked as one of the top 25 destinations, coming in at number 17. And twice now, Ambergris Caye has been recognized as the #1 island in the world. So from a tourism standpoint, you can see that there's a lot of recognition, a lot of accolades for Ambergris Caye, but tourism is the precursor to development and to investment, because what happens is when people visit a tourism destination and they fall in love with it, as obviously those reviewers for TripAdvisor have, when they fall in love with a destination, that's when they choose to invest, to either buy a piece of land to build on, to buy a condo, to buy a single family home, to buy a second home, a third home, or what have you. And so tourism is a precursor to real estate investment. So in markets where we see tourism growing, we know that that's a precursor to seeing there being more real estate investment, and therefore an increase not only in demand, but in property values. That's really what we're able to see as we study and analyze the growth of tourism in any given market. And so in the Belize market, as we look at Ambergris Caye Belize, we pay particular attention to what are known as the overnight tourist arrivals coming in through the airport. So we don't specifically track the cruise ship passengers because they're not really in the country for more than 6 hours at a time. Our focus is really predominantly on the people that are flying into the international airport that stay on average for 7 days. These are the people that are going to choose to invest in the marketplace. And so we wanted to show you here that over a 5-year period up till 2017, we had about an 83% increase in overnight tourist arrivals, almost 14% average annualized growth. And then, of course, on the heels of that, 2018, we saw a 14.7% increase in tourism. And then 2019, we still saw an additional 4% increase. So year after year, year over year, we see a compounded growth where the growth is building on top of itself. And what's really exciting for me about 2020 as we look forward is that this is going to be the year that we see the most significant increase in new nonstop service to Belize from 3 of the top destinations in the world, really 3 of the most predominant cities that could impact us. One of them is New York City. There's going to be an announcement soon to come with American Airlines where they're going to be expanding their service and offering nonstop service between New York City and Belize. There's a forthcoming announcement later in the year with British Airways for nonstop flights between London and Belize. These will be the first nonstop flights between Europe and Belize, and that is absolutely huge for us. Being a British Commonwealth country, formerly being part of the being a British territory, our connection is very strong with the UK, and so direct flights from London are huge for us. And then the third city that is scheduled to commence nonstop service is Washington, D.C. So again, we fully expect with these new nonstop flights, we're going to see a further increase in tourism, which is going to create an even larger market and larger demand for exactly what we have to offer, which is real estate. And you're going to see what I mean by that as we get into the nitty-gritty and the details of this specific offering. Now, we have a little video that I'm going to play for you. I was just on island about a week ago, and on your screen right now, you can see the west coast of Squirrel Caye. Squirrel Caye is a 25-acre island. This is the island that our fund is acquiring. We've got it under contract for below market value. We also have it under contract, already having received the entitlements and the environmental approval to be able to subdivide this island, to dig canals, and to use that fill to fill the island and to create 161 waterfront lots over 50 of which are direct beachfront with unobstructed views. And I'm going to just play this little video. Later in the video, it's only a 2.5-minute video, but later in the video, you're going to see some land that started off very similar to the condition of Squirrel Cay, where many parts of it were right at sea level or just slightly submerged below sea level. The area that I'm talking about is now referred to as Mahogany Bay Resort. It's where the Hilton Hotel is located, the first branded hotel in all of Ambergris Caye. It's now a 300-room curio collection by Hilton, and you're going to see the transformation over the course of time in that development. But I use it to help you to appreciate and understand that, yes, we are able to develop this island, and you're going to see exactly how that transformation takes place. This isn't our first rodeo. We've done this before. I've been involved as a principal in doing other developments of this nature and in selling out those developments. So this is a case of rinse and repeat. We're taking our expertise, our know-how, our contacts, our knowledge, our experience, and we're just simply putting it to work again on a new development, and that new development opportunity being this 25-acre island. So I'm going to go ahead and start the video. Sit back and enjoy just for the next couple minutes.
So here we are on the west coast of Squirrel Cay. Now, Squirrel Cay is a 25-acre island in very close proximity to downtown San Pedro. We're just about a mile by boat from San Pedro, and we're on the west side of Ambergris Caye. So to my right here, about 12 miles off in the distance, is the mainland of Belize. So as we're facing to the west, we're going to have about 26 beachfront lots here with $1 million sunset, unobstructed views, absolutely pristine conditions. Directly behind me is CAYE. The CAYE is a world-renowned luxurious resort, one of the top honeymoon destinations in the world. Absolutely beautiful, beautiful surroundings. It's just an idyllic, serene location. Typically, room rates there are going to be about $2,000 to $3,000 a night. There's 7 private cottages or bungalows on the island, and it's, as I said, one of the most sought-after honeymoon destinations, not just in the Caribbean, but really anywhere in the world. What makes Squirrel Cay so special is the ability for us to create additional beachfront lots in a market that is devoid of any new beachfront inventory. On the east coast of Ambergris Caye, that's where the development has historically taken place, but it's so much sought after to have sunset views as opposed to sunrise views. There's very, very little in the way of development that's occurred here on the west coast of Ambergris Caye, and so our ability to create 161 waterfront lots, all of them being either canal front or beachfront, allows us to bring to market what people are looking for. And especially when it comes to beachfront, that is where the market is craving new inventory. So these are our beautiful surroundings. It's early in the morning. It's about 8 o'clock in the morning, so we don't have the right sun to enjoy the sunset. But just wanted to give you a look at the surroundings here on Squirrel Cay.
Okay, so I'm going to cut the music, and this is showing the raw land where Mahogany Bay Resort was first developed. So there's a large lake there. This is actually a split photo because we have different satellite imagery, but you can see the canals that were dug. You can see the land that was created, the topography was changed. And just on the other side of the road there, all of that land underwater, that's where the resort, the 300-room hotel, is now located. I'm going to pause the screen again in just a moment. Here you can see the canals being dug. This was about 10 years ago in 2009. And then in 2013 is when the construction first started on the resort. And then fast forward to today, I'm going to pause this here just for a moment. This is the Hilton Hotel, the Hilton Resort. So it's a 300-room hotel, curio collection by Hilton. One of my favorite things to point out here is that just to the left of your screen, that very large 3-story building is called the Great House. That's the lobby or the reception for the Hilton. It's the largest freestanding hardwood structure in Belize, coming in at 26,000 square feet. And it was all, the land beneath it didn't exist just a few years ago. It was all underwater, and it was filled in using excavators, the same methodology that we're going to use on Squirrel Cay. And then they drove foundation pilings down to bedrock. In this particular case, bedrock is only at about 6 to 14 feet of depth, so very shallow to reach bedrock. And lo and behold, you've got this 26,000 square foot lobby and reception for the Hilton Hotel with multiple restaurants and swimming pool. But I just wanted to give you an idea that this is exactly what we're going to do as far as the transformation of land with Squirrel Cay. And the value add for us is in doing the work of digging those canals, of subdividing and creating 161 separate waterfront lots. That's Squirrel Key there in the foreground. And you're going to see a site map or a subdivision plan that's been approved that allows us to, as I said, create 161 entirely waterfront lots. So when we talk about the specifics of the investment has a $50,000 minimum entry, and you can increase that amount. We've had some come in at $70,000 or $90,000 or $150,000. So in $10,000 increments, with $50,000 being the minimum investment, the annualized return is projected at 26.8%, and that's with a 3-year timeline. The total return to investors is 80.5%, and we'll talk about how that comes about. But it's important to understand that there'll be quarterly distributions. Those distributions will begin or commence as soon as we've started selling the subdivided lots. So we've already accelerated our timetable and really kind of jumped the gun by almost a year by having our provisional approval to subdivide. That process usually takes at least a year, and we already have that in hand before closing on the property. So as soon as we close on the syndication, which should take place next week, then we will be able to immediately have our surveyor start the process of surveying the 161 lots. We'll then work with the lands department and the lands registry and the land utilization authority to issue the 161 separate titles. And then our real estate offices there in Ambergris Key through the RE/MAX network will start marketing and advertising and selling the lots. And as we sell the lots, there'll be a full repayment of investor capital until all of the equity raise, the full $7 million of equity raise, has been returned to investors. Then and only then will we see a split with the sponsor. So this is structured as an 80-20 split. 80% of the profits are returned to the investors after the full repayment of their investor capital, and then 20% of the profits is what we, the syndicators, Agro-Nosotros and Belize Asset Management, receive for our putting together, structuring, managing, overseeing, and supervising the deal and delivering these returns to the investors. So we don't see a dime of profitability until we've returned all of your initial investor capital. And when you look at the current economic climate, as I'm sure most of you are aware, today marked the end of the 11-year bear run, the longest ever bull market in U.S. history, ended today on March 11th, 2020. And so a lot of people are concerned about, having their money in the stock market. Do I sit on the sidelines? Do I put it in treasury bonds, treasury bills? Where is the safe haven for my investment right now? In fact, in times such as this, we often find that people become more concerned about the return of their investment than the return on their investment. We're used to thinking in terms of what's the ROI, the return on my investment. But when we see, huge, so incredibly well suited for these exact market conditions. Why is that? Well, for one, because we're acquiring the island for below market value. I know from experience, I know from having acquired multiple islands myself and from having been in the process of developing multiple islands really over the last 10 years in this marketplace, I've had MAI certified appraisers come in and show that $300,000 per acre of raw land value is the current appraised value in this marketplace. That would give us a valuation of just over about $7.7 million. Our total acquisition cost for the fund is $7 million, coming in about 10% less than that, but our acquisition of the island itself comes in at $5.75 million, so well below appraised value. And the delta, or the difference between the $5.75 million acquisition price and the $7 million of the total equity raise, is the money necessary for us to go through and do the improvements and the entitlements for us to bring electricity in so that all of the lots can be offered with electricity, so that all the canals can be dug, so that all the surveying and the subdividing can take place, and so that we're left with a total of 161 lots, which have a market value of just over $16 million. And as I mentioned, this is not our first rodeo. This is something that we have a great deal of experience with. And so as I go to this next slide, this shows the approved subdivision plan. We've already gotten our approval from the Department of Environment, the Ministry of Natural Resources, from the lands department for us to do this exact plan with 161 lots. On the west coast there's 26 beachfront lots that wrap around the tip. So 26 direct beachfront lots. There's an additional 50 beachfront lots that are north facing, and then the balance of 101 lots are all canal front or still waterfront access. There's over 1,100 feet of prime west facing beachfront, the most desirable of all property in Ambergris Caye. And I think it's really important to understand it. We talked about it earlier, but when people are given the choice between having a sunrise view or a sunset view absolutely commands the premium, anywhere from a 30 to a 50% premium for sunset views. Historically, almost all the development on Ambergris Caye is taking place on the East Coast, where you have sunrise views. And so it begs the question, well, why is that? Well, it's because the island wasn't master planned by real estate developers. It was a sleepy fishing village, and the fishermen wanted to have close proximity to the fish, which were located in and around the barrier reef, and hence the town of San Pedro was built on the east side of the island. But from a real estate investment or a development standpoint, the bullseye where you would want to be is on the west coast, where you have those beautiful $1 million sunset views of the sun setting directly on the horizon over the water. There are only 2 subdivisions on the entire west coast of Ambergris Caye. Both of them are sold out. It's a very rare occurrence for any lots to come available as resales. And so this will be the first development in over 15 years to come to market with West Coast beachfront lots. Our sales agents, we have over 10 RE/MAX sales agents in the Ambergris Caye market. Those agents are chomping at the bit to be able to have inventory such as this, to be able to go to their clients and say, yes, finally, we have some new beachfront lots for you to be able to buy, to invest, to either hold on to build on, to develop, to build your dream home, your second home, your third home, your summer getaway, or what have you. So this is what the market is clamoring for, and we're just simply bringing to market what the market is asking for. There's far, far more demand for beachfront lots than even the inventory that we're going to be bringing to market here. So our total equity raise is $7 million of financing for us to acquire and develop the private 25-acre island of Squirrel Caye into 161 waterfront lots. There's already $6 million in place, leaving $1 million available for those who are participating here on the webinar or watching the recording of this webinar. So we're very close to closing out the fund. This is the third such Ambergris Caye project that's been undertaken by the principals, and we have experience in over 1,500 lot sales in similar projects to date in this very market. So again, something we're very familiar with, very comfortable with, very accustomed to. This is what we do day in and day out. And again, we already have the environmental, the provisional approval to subdivide already in hand, and that allows us to hit the ground running and really to deliver returns to the investors within the first 12 months instead of spending the first 12 months trying to get that approval in place. So what is our exit strategy and how are we going to execute it? Well, our exit strategy is to utilize the RE/MAX network. RE/MAX is the #1 real estate company in the Ambergris Caye market. We have 8 offices throughout Belize. I've been involved with RE/MAX in this market for the last 10 years. And so in addition to being the CEO for the entire Caribbean and Central America region, I also own and operate an office in the Ambergris Caye market. There's multiple offices in this market. And as I said, all of the agents in all of those offices, as well as our neighboring sister offices throughout Nicaragua, Honduras, Panama, Guatemala, all of our neighboring RE/MAX offices will be working through the referral network to bring buyers and clients to us. But just our agents that are on the ground, they've already got a database of people that are looking for property on the West Coast. And so we feel very comfortable with our projections and our timeline. In the pro forma, in the PPM, the private placement memorandum, you'll see that we're very conservatively showing either a 3 or 4 year return pro forma. With 3 years, it's a 26.8% annualized return, and over 4 years, it's a 20.1%. But especially with the continued increase in tourism, the new flights from New York, London, and Washington, D.C., I really feel we're going to be pushing in on the shorter end of the time frame when it comes to the sellout of the inventory that we're creating in this particular project. So the next steps is, of course, a natural question. Darren Doyle, the president and co-founder of Agrinosotros, is your contact person. And really the next step is to either email or call Darren, reach out to him, ideally this evening, ask him to send you the paperwork and the wiring instructions. As I said, there's only $1 million left of the $7 million equity raise. If you do have questions about the executive summary or the private placement memorandum, then Darren will be happy to walk you through those step by step. But we're really at the very tail end of closing this out. And this is probably, well, I won't say probably, this is one of the, if not the most exciting opportunities that I've seen in quite some time. And I'm particularly excited that we're able to bring it to our investors. I really see this as a home run, not a single or a double. And especially so because of having that provisional approval to subdivide already in hand. That's the most challenging, the most risky part in doing a project such as this. You know, if it were to take 2 or even 3 years to get the approval, then that can make the returns drag out over a longer period of time. The fact that we have that in hand, already signed off with all approvals in place, that's what really makes this a home run opportunity. That and the fact that we've done this, we have a solid track record of success with this, and we've sold over 1,500 lots, very similar to the 161 lots here. So if you haven't already, take down the phone number, either of the 2 phone numbers there, the 520, that's the area code, so it's actually plus 520-226-9119. If you dial just 520, then you're going to get an area code in the US, so be sure to do plus or 00 in front of the 520. There's a toll-free number there starting with 877-208-7988, and then Darren's email address there as well. So now we're going to open it up to Q&A. Darren is going to be sorting through this. We've had a couple of questions come in so far, and so we're going to let Darren just read through some of the questions, and I'll go ahead and answer those one by one to make sure that we cover the topics thoroughly. So Darren, what's the first question you have there?
Okay, cool. Thank you very much, John. Very, very well explained presentation. We very intentionally kept it short. We know you guys have busy lives. Everybody on this webinar has already received an email with a link to the full set of private placement documentation. You've received a couple of emails, hopefully had a chance to look at the website. So you were already fairly up to speed on the details of the opportunity. So if you have any questions, send them in on the chat. While I'm waiting, I do have a couple of questions that were sent in ahead of time, so we can start off with those. And then anything that you think of, you can just send them in on the chat here. One thing to clarify, that 520 number is an Arizona-based number, so you can just call that as a regular US number.
My apologies, Darren. Thank you.
No worries, and that will come straight through to my cell phone. So all of you have my contact details anyway from our emails and previous conversations. So. Okay, so while we're waiting for some more questions, the first one we have in from Matt is, do we know that we can develop and build on the land?
And the answer is an absolute positive yes, with absolute certainty. In fact, we would not have been able to get our clearance from the Department of Environment, the Ministry of Natural Resources, and the Lands Department unless that was a certainty. So we do have title to the property. We know for a certainty that we have the approval to excavate the canals exactly as shown. We submitted that plan for approval, knowing exactly how much fill material would be required and necessary for us to create the land base for the 161 parcels, as well as the requisite open spaces that have to be provided along with those. So the answer is that yes, with absolute certainty, we know that we both have the approval to do so and have the wherewithal and the ability to transform the land into actually what the subdivision plan calls for. And very much like you saw in the video with Mahogany Bay Resort, we've been involved in doing this exact same thing. I worked with the land developer on Mahogany Bay Resort since 2007 and was a part of that entire transformation process of those canals being dug, the land being terraformed and transformed. And it's the same architect, the same land planner, the same surveyors that we used on Mahogany Bay Resort that we're using on Squirrel Key and that I've used on several other projects in the interim. So we've got a very, very long-standing team in Belize that I've worked with for many, many years and that we've worked with very successfully. And so we know exactly what we're doing here.
And that team and the experience and the previous projects done in this market is what gives us such a high comfort level of working with projects like this and with Cayo Grande as well. So one more from Derek. So in the executive summary, it showed 3 different plans. So I think Derek is asking, have we finalized on which development plan we will implement?
Yeah, very, very perceptive, Derek, and that's a great question, because when the executive summary was compiled, we were still exploring different plans that we were looking to pursue. In fact, when we first put together the executive summary, we didn't realize that we were going to be in the enviable position of actually having the approval to subdivide prior to closing on the island. That's has not happened to me before. I'm extremely ecstatic that it did happen in this particular case. So the answer is that we know with certainty exactly which plan we're going to proceed with. We have, in fact, at the very end of the executive summary, we've included the approved subdivision plans as well as the letters showing us, I believe they were dated December 18th, showing us from the Commissioner of Lands the approval to subdivide, and that we have to do the subdivision according to the plans that were approved by government. So we submitted a plan that called for 169 lots. They made some revisions and changes, made some of the lots a little bit larger, came back to us. After a couple of rounds back and forth, we finally settled on a plan that calls for 161 waterfront lots, and which was well more than we were hoping for. Even though we asked for 169, we were prepared to take a much smaller number, and we came in so much closer to our ask than we could have ever hoped for. And so we really knocked it out of the park on that one. But yes, with certainty, we know exactly which plan we're going to pursue because it's the plan that has already received governmental approval.
Yeah, and as John said, so the letter is in the end of the executive summary, and in the email that I sent everybody with a link to the Dropbox, there's the actual subdivision plans as well. So you have a copy of everything there. And then a question, Miami Jeff, as he calls himself, given all the concerns with the stock market, is this a good time for this type of investment?
Yeah, the only time that would have been better would have been 2 weeks ago if you had pulled your funds out of the market 2 weeks ago and had opportunity to allocate it towards this investment. But having said that, and I don't say that disrespectfully, because I realize that many people have taken a substantial hit both this week and in the last few weeks for those who are invested in paper assets, invested in the stock market. I think that with all of the uncertainty, I don't think that the market uncertainty is over with. If anything, I think it's really just starting at this point. I think that it's a very rocky road ahead of us over the coming weeks and months. I think especially if you have funds that are in self-directed IRAs or solo 401ks, and you have a long-term perspective, now would be the time to look at diversifying your portfolio and taking some of your self-directed retirement funds and putting it towards this opportunity. If you have cash that's sitting on the sidelines and you've been uncertain as to whether or not to try to time getting back into the market, or if you simply want to cut your losses at this point, bearing in mind that there's a lot of good reason to believe that the downward cycle or the downward trend is going to continue, it may be the time to go ahead and pull the plug and pull the parachute, so to speak. The reason that I'm so bullish on this is that this specific opportunity is going to last a lot longer than the short-term roller coaster that we're seeing, both with the stock market and with what is transpiring with the coronavirus. We don't know just how bad it's going to get in the United States and other markets with regard to the coronavirus, how much of a recession there's going to be, how much of an economic impact there's going to be, and if that economic impact is going to last for months or even for a couple of years. But what I can tell you is, based on my own experience going through the Great Recession of 2008, 9, and 10, when I was in this specific market, I actually was involved in the development of a subdivision very similar to Squirrel Key, and successfully sold that project out. We started selling at the end of 2009, right in the heart of the recession. We sold it out by 2012. That particular development was 1,200 parcels instead of 161 parcels. And we saw a 300% increase in value from the time we started selling lots till we finished selling lots. And that 300% increase took place between 2009 and 2012, with most of that time being in the heart of the recession. So I can tell you for a certainty that there's a finite amount of beachfront property. There's a finite amount of desirable retirement destinations. We are actually creating new beachfront property in a market that hasn't had any new beachfront on the West Coast in over 15 years. And so, you know, whether the current economic crisis is short-lived and recovers by the end of 2020, or if it's a longer, larger recession that we're about to enter into and it carries on for a year or two, what I can tell you is this: we're acquiring the land for well below market value. We're going to do the necessary steps to create about a $16 million valuation based on today's prices. It's not factoring in any appreciation over our 3-year sales cycle. That's really going to be, you know, any appreciation during the 3 years is icing on the cake. We're just going on the presumptive basis of what could the property sell for today. And so, you know, it's to our benefit that we have the approval in hand, but it's going to take 9 months for us to get the surveying done, for us to go to the government, to the Land Utilization Authority, and have the titles issued, to come back and have 161 titles, for us to start marketing and advertising through the DreamX network and start selling these lots one by one. So all the while that we're going through that surveying process and we're doing our value add, we're increasing the value of the island, all of that is transpiring irrespective of what the stock market is doing, what the economy is doing, whether there's any recession in place. We are going to be fundamentally increasing the value of the island and the property through measures that are completely independent of the stock market. And when you're looking to diversify your portfolio and to ensure not only a return of your investment, but a good solid return on your investment, this is exactly what you should be looking for.
The one touching base there on those of you that are listening, I know a lot of our clients have recently switched to EQRP plans. So these investments are EQRP eligible. So you can use your EQRP for this. One more question, kind of similar, but relates more to the timing. How will the events of the last few days affect our 3-year timing or the returns?
I really don't think that they will. What you're going to find is that the events of the last several days are going to have no bearing or impact on the surveying process, which is going to take a good 2 to 3 months on its own. It's the events of the last couple of days will have no bearing or impact on the process of the Land Utilization Authority and the Lands Department, which takes about 6 months for us to go through the mutation of title to subdivide and create the 161 titles. And so we're 9 months to a year away from hitting the ground running. And we already have a backlog of clients, a backlog of people that desire to have beachfront property, a raw land to develop at a good price. And so, you know, if anything, I think that we actually stand to have an increase or a shortening of our timetable, simply because the more economic uncertainty there is, the more catalyst or reason or motivation there is for people to pull their money out of the stock market. And I'm not talking about people choosing to invest in the fund or the syndication. I'm talking about people choosing to buy tangible assets and buy real property. People that would say, I would like to buy a beachfront lot, knowing that beachfront property appreciates at 10 to 15% annually on average, as opposed to leaving my money in the stock market for the next year and seeing just how much worse this roller coaster gets. So if anything, I think that we might have actually been able to shorten our timetable rather than have it take the full 3 to 4 years that's projected.
Well said. Keep your questions coming in. I've got 2 more questions here now, but if you can think of any more, send them in through on the chat. Dave is asking, am I investing in an offshore or a US-based entity? And then if it's US-based, what kind of paperwork will I get?
Okay, great question. So this is a Wyoming LLC. We intentionally structured this as a Wyoming LLC so that it does fall under the purview or the regulations of the SEC, the Securities Exchange Commission. This is what is known as a Rule 506 offering under Reg D, which means that we can only accept accredited investors. Accredited investors are those that make $200,000 a year in income for each of the last 2 years and have a reasonable expectation of doing so moving forward, or have household income of $300,000 or higher, or have a net worth of $1 million, not including their primary residence. So as a Wyoming LLC, we're following the SEC requirements of only taking on accredited investors. And in answer to your question more directly, yes, you'll receive a K-1 for your tax return from the LLC each year that the syndication is still in place.
Very good. I think that's an important question. I've got that from quite a few of our investors who've already participated. One last question here from Dave. Will my initial investment capital and then my returns go to and from a US bank?
Yes, so the company, the Wyoming LLC, is Squirrel Key Island LLC. That company formation, as I said, has already taken place. We've also already opened bank accounts with Bank of America that are in the name of Squirrel Key Island LLC. So all wire transfers to participate in the fund will be sent to our account with Bank of America, and all distributions will be received from the domestic Bank of America branch that we're sending from as well.
I think that will appeal to a lot of our investors. Doing it from a domestic bank versus doing international transfers, especially when it comes to the quarterly distributions, I think will be convenient and appealing.
Absolutely, and I think, Darren, just to touch on that as well, I think it's important to understand as well that all of the quarterly distributions that will take place in the first couple years will be return of equity. So they'll be non-taxable in the sense that there's no profit being taken. It'll be a return of equity on the quarterly distributions until such time as we return to 100% of the equity. At that point, any additional distributions, or I should say all of the additional quarterly distributions after that point, will be profit and will be taxable. But at that point, you'll be on house money because you'll have received 100% of your capital back and you'll no longer have any money at risk.
Good point. One more in from Julia. Can Class A investors acquire some of the lots, and do we get a discount if we do?
Okay, that's a great question, and actually we've had a surprising number of people who have asked about that, and I think it helps us to appreciate how much demand there is for desirable beachfront property. So it's a good news, bad news. The good news portion of that, Julia, is that yes, as an investor in the fund, you're going to have a first crack, or we'll call it a sneak preview, or first right of refusal, whatever you want to refer to it as. All of the investors will have first opportunity to purchase the finished subdivided lots as soon as we have those ready to go to market. We're not going to have discounted prices for the investors. We'll have discounted, or I should say, preferential treatment in terms of availability and selection, but we're not going to discount the prices so as to honor the return to all of the investors, so that for any investor that chooses not to buy a lot, they're not going to be penalized by us offering discounts to their fellow investors. So, there will, of course, likely be phased pricing. So the initial pricing that comes to market will probably be less than what we sell out the lots for as we have more sales, and as we get further along in digging the canals and the excavation and delivering the finished product, just as has been the case in our other subdivision developments we've been a part of, there'll be phased pricing. So prices will get higher as the development gets further along. So in effect, I guess you could argue that you will have a discount because you're going to have the opportunity to come in and have free reign and first selection out of all of the lots before we go to the general public. So even though the RE/MAX agents I mentioned, they have a list of clients who are waiting and clamoring for us to bring this inventory to market, those clients, no matter how long they've been on their list, are not going to get a crack at this until each and every investor in the fund has a chance to buy as many lots as they choose to at the introductory pricing.
Okay, I think that's pretty fair. That's all the questions I can see coming through here. So we're at, what are we now, 49 minutes, so we're under the hour. If you guys have any last minute questions, feel free to send them through. Otherwise, you have all the information. If you, for some reason, did not receive an email from me over the last couple of days or week that has a link to a Dropbox account that has all the private placement documentation and a copy of the subdivision, let me know. You all have my contact information at this stage, but it's darrend@agronosotros.com. Respond to any of the emails you received from me or any of the newsletters. If you've read everything, you're happy with what you have seen, and you wanted to just hear one final presentation from John to hear some of the backstory, and you're happy to participate, there is just under $1 million available. Send in a signed copy of the operating agreement, the subscription agreements, and even if you have invested with us previously, we do still need the investor suitability questionnaire to be submitted. The first step, as it is a 506c, we do have to do third-party verification. If you have a letter from your CPA that's valid, I think, John, is it inside 90 days? For the letter, yeah. If you have a letter inside 90 days, include that with your signed documentation. Specify on the subscription agreement how many units you wish to acquire. The entry level is 50,000. John originally launched this with a minimum entry level of 100,000, and David negotiated a lower special $50,000 entry level for our Agri-Nosotros database. So you can, minimum entry is 50, you can increase it in $10,000 increments. So we have some for 60, 70, 90, whatever you want to do. Let me know as soon as possible, send in that signed paperwork. We'll get started on the third-party verification, and then we can arrange funding to the US bank account. So, John, I don't see any more questions coming through here. Is there any final points, anything else you wanted to add here, or?
Yeah, just one closing thought, and then we'll go ahead and sign off. I want to mention that, as Darren just said, there's $1 million left of the $7 million raise. I think it's really important for everyone on this call to understand that the $6 million that has already been committed and received was committed and paid into the account prior to the recent scare with coronavirus and the end of the bull market. So the roller coaster that we've seen over the last week or even 2 weeks, that has all taken place after most of the commitment of funds to this syndication. If anything, there's a far more compelling reason to invest and participate in this fund now because of what's happening in the stock market, and even more so than there was previously. So, you know, the fact that there's only $1 million left, we expect that that's going to go very quickly. I also expect that a number of our existing investors are probably going to enhance or increase their positions. We've had a number of investors reach out to us to say how thankful they are that they got in prior to the market crash. But I don't think that the market crash is over with. That's my personal opinion. But we'll see how the coming days and weeks play out. But I think that the time could not be any better to get in this opportunity, bearing in mind that there's limited space available. So we are going to do this on a first come, first served basis, just out of fairness to all investors. So please reach out to Darren following this. With that, we're going to go ahead and call this an end to the webinar. We thank you all for your participation and for being with us, and wish you all a good night.
Thank you very much. Happy investing.